AskReddit by Bree. What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? I always ask about training and learning curves. Every job I've had that went wrong, I noticed that when that question came up they stumbled. The current job I have, when I asked the question they had sparks in their eyes as they explained the whole process from day one of shadowing to the transition to working solo. And even when covered it they managed to continue without skipping a beat. Edit. Oh gosh, thank you. My first ever award. Made my week. Very smart. My last bad job was one where the supervisor took me around and rattled off a non-stop stream of details. I got out my notepad and a pen. We don't have time for that. They told me all about their generous severance packages. In the initial interview. Turnover city. Well, the overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Spoilers, the overtime is mandatory. Fantastic. You should know that if you choose me for this position, I will be declining the optional overtime. I mean, if you're going to walk anyway, it might be funny to call their bluff. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. On a second interview, the general manager brought me into the conference room with his 8 managers present. At first I thought it was a meet and greet, but no, they grilled me for an hour and a half. Didn't appreciate that, along with a couple other things, and politely withdrew from being considered. Couple months later I'm playing in a bowl tournament and come across one of the managers. I mentioned how weird that interview was. He says, "Weird for you? Ha. I found out then and there you were being interviewed for my job." Yep, dodged a bullet there. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen, because they didn't even try to hide it. Since when is it legal to have employees working and not paying them? What a psycho. I was once part of a group onboarding for a job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract and everyone except me signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy, attached without other pages. There was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the HR drone said, "Okay, I guess, me, is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you are struggling so much." After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that HR reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would have been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me, and they weren't able to. Last job I worked. Yay, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back, so being your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. Eater. Also was told by my trainer, "You want to know the best advice I can give you? Find another job." This was like my second week in. "They're afraid you'll never come back" is so funny to me. My favorite is there's a lot of people waiting in line to work here. Count yourself lucky. Huge red flag. After my last job I have learned to take the attitude at an interviewing the job to I used to think, well, I need a job and let myself think it was sweet that I was being given the chance, but I have a great work ethic, so I always become the man. Supervisors seem to love that term. Well, I've learned that when they say that, they mean they are going to heap a lot more work and responsibility on you than your co-workers. So, now I go into interviews with the attitude that I can always find another job, so I judge the company now. When they ask out of nowhere, what clients can you bring with you? I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. Noped out of that quickly. This actually happened to me. Interviewer, do you have any questions for us? Me, what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer, job security. LeMayo gotta give them props for honesty at that point. He should have just gotten up and opened the door and gestured out. Besides always hiring, they seem almost overly eager to say, yes, we could do that to everything you ask. No job will have literally everything you want, and if your gut is telling you they seem to be promising a bit more than they can offer, they likely are. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that, just sign here and so on. Deleted. I didn't know it at the time, but "you'll be wearing many hats" was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto if I ever heard one. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said, ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer, I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I feel like that would put a lot of pressure on the employee to not say anything to dissuade an applicant and upset management. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself from the company. This is illegal in most US states, unknown about outside the US. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, "Oh, she's not here today," in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW but could come in any time. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager bad-mouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello? I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow? I would be livid. Definitely shows a complete disregard for your time. When you ask, "What do you like about working here?" and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, "It's a great place to live," instead of the actual job. I asked this at one of my first interviews right out of school. My interviewer went, "That's a good question," and was ruminating for a good 2 minutes. She went with, "We get pretty good parking spots," and quickly followed with, "And the people are nice." I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate, so to attract me the manager showed me some pay stubs from his guys. I noticed that 1. He could easily cherry pick pay stubs to show his best guys' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. 2. The pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing. They were a full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, obviously not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs or KMS was. 3. He showed me other people pay stubs. WTF? Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire, because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had 2 guys from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. 1. What did the previous employees say when you were considering? 2. If they were that desperate you could have possibly done some hard negotiation. We only want the best of the best. Me. How much are you paying? Minimum wage. Salary, competitive $euro. Reality, minimum wage. I brought up a company's awful Glassdoor reviews and they got so mad they ended the interview. Well, guess I dodged that bullet. I've done this a few times during interviews. I've gotten the same responses and it has never been addressed professionally. Even when companies have stellar reviews, I like to ask about their online reviews. It shows me their reactions to stressful situations. I also figure they're looking at everyone's LinkedIn or whatever, so if they judge me by my online presence, I don't see why I can't do that to them. I'm not obligated to work for someone simply because they extended an interview. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face, with the caption "I spoke with boss name about it. I guess we're still doing it." That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff, consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. There's a good saying, people often don't quit jobs, they quit managers. Deleted. I had the opposite experience from your first one. Interviewed for a call center, thinking I'd probably either just not take it at all because I imagined it would be really draining, or just do it for a couple of weeks until I found something better. But then decided to stay because everyone seemed really nice and chill about the whole deal. Still working there, and probably gonna stay until I'm done with uni. I was once told sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running, but management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the union so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. The question was subtle red flags. I had an interview once. The owner of the company told me he was going to hire me, let the man in the office train me, then fire that man once I was up to speed. He also told me that sometimes employees have to hold their paycheck. And the final capper, not that I needed it, I had already decided not to work for him, was he told me I looked like his nephew. I am female. If they seemed to relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. I just had an interview last week where they showed up 30 minutes late because they weren't expecting me to show up after the first 3 hires never came to work. Tried to hire me on spot and wanted me to work a different department than what I applied for. Employees are either new hires or have been there for 15+ years with no in between. There is no room for improvement, it's better to leave for advancement. There are 1 or 2 exceptions to this. I've been at companies where you have the 20+ year veterans who love what they do and refuse to move up. So you have a young crowd before they move up and an old grizzled veteran crowd. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Made this mistake a few times, was the worst jobs. During my last semester in nursing school, I went ahead and started applying for jobs. One was on a neuro floor, adults, at a local hospital. Interestingly enough, my own neurologist worked at that hospital. Anyway, the posting showed day shift 312s, which is what I wanted. I got a call to interview 2 days after applying. When I got on the floor, everyone looked absolutely exhausted. However, the part that bothered me was that no one said hi or smiled when I introduced myself. They just ignored me while I was waiting on the supervisor. I interviewed with her, as well as 3 other nurses on the floor. There was a desperation in their faces, and I think they were hoping this new grad would be grateful for a job. However, the supervisor told me the position was actually night shift. I explained that I could not do that, for several reasons. Sleep deprivation equals seizures for me. She saw. When they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company, they work hard, but also play hard. They don't play hard, it's a sweatshop, and they're just trying to convince that it's anything but one. 100% work hard play hard translates to a minimum of 50 hours a week, but you can use our games room because we totally have one. We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed, expecting more work for no extra pay. Getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. Well, then you won't mind if I come in at 9:30. You are not watching the clock, after all. Deleted. Absolutely. It feels wrong initially to pry, but you have every right to know the circumstances you're walking into, within reason. If they volunteer that information, that's a good sign.